And I was actually leaving the club, or I was preparing to leave at 3 a.m. and I was taking my radio off in the sort of staff area, and then the club would close at 3:30. And as I was taking my radio off, there was like this horrific scream down the radio, and someone had called a code black. And so incidents in nightclubs work, and code green's everything's okay. Amber was like, oh, it's about to go wrong. Red's it's kicked off, people are fighting, and black's like, we've lost full control. So I was with another guy and we're like, oh shit, we better go to it. Went to that place in the nightclub where it happened, and when we arrived at the scene, there was a load of people basically on the floor scrapping it out. And I jumped in, started to pin the legs down of one of the people who was quite a giant, who I saw earlier in the night. Fast forward time, couple of minutes, and one of the guys realised that he wasn't doing too well. We rolled him over and began CPR on him straight away, and unfortunately passed away there and then on the spot.
Ben, how are we doing?
Very well, how are you?
I'm all good. I'm looking forward to a relaxing Christmas that is potentially compromised by needing to go and get tested, having been in contact with someone, but I'm sure I'm not the only one in the UK in that situation. So first up, very keen to hear about your upbringing, your childhood, and what basically underpinned the man that you are today.
So my upbringing, I always sort of say, in the lightest ways, I don't like the broken wing story. My upbringing's my upbringing, and it had its difficulties and it had its lovely moments as well. But my parents fell out quite early doors, sort of around 5 or 6, and it was a very nasty break. And Dad disappeared for a long time. Mum lost the house. We had to move schools several times, move houses several times, and she met someone who came into her life who just lacked the ability to be a dad, an alpha male, to who my brother and I needed at the time. Bearing in mind, Dad had disappeared off the scene for quite a while, and I think this kind of began to shape me in my early days of where I would sort of navigate myself towards in the future. And I always remember as a young kid, I always wanted to be, dare I say, a commando of some sort. The first beret I was bought from an Aldershot military shop, second hand, third hand, usually in some cases ninth hand, was a para-reg beret, which I used to wear with pride and loved it. And I just knew that I wanted to be part of that journey in some way or another. And I remember we used to have this babysitter who'd come round, and when Mum would need a night off from looking after us all the time before she met her partner, we had this babysitter come round who had a boyfriend who was a para, and he'd come round, look after us with her, and we'd go out, hide in the bushes, and he'd put cam cream on us and run around with glow sticks and stuff. It was awesome. I remember feeling very inspired by that character. But yeah, that we ended up moving in with Mum's new boyfriend at the time, and I think we always look to see how our past defines us, and why do I think like I think now. And it only took me beginning of this year when I was on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, Dario's CEO, where we had a conversation. I thought, shit, actually now it begins to make quite a bit of sense that when I tracked back in time, I've always needed to be around an alpha male, because it was something that I believe we completely lacked when it all went wrong in our early years, in our teens. And that journey sort of, because of moving school a lot, I didn't help myself because I fell into like loving heavy metal, and at the time heavy metal came with black fingernails and dog collars.
Studded belts was what I remember. Studded belts and checkered Vans. Yeah,
the good shit. And then obviously if you go into a new school dressed as that kid, well, let's throw shit at him. But I would never say I was bullied. I'd never say I was the bullied child, or just like the kid who didn't really fit in. What sort of enabled me to fit in at the time was unfortunately hanging around people which were taking drugs, and the weed, and starting off on sort of smoking weed for a number of years, and it kind of snowballing. And then part of my journey was trying to discover who I was as a guy. And within, I think, my late part of sixth form, so I wanted to join the Marines in that break between year 11 and then sixth form, and I was like, oh, fuck school. I pulled the application form up, wanted to go into the Marines, and my mum was like, think about what you're doing. You can do a little bit more before you join the Marines. even though she wanted to get shot of me and get me in the Corps, she was like, just finish your school. And that put me in a really bitter place, because I wanted to be in the Corps for being around that ethos, being around those values, being around probably those alpha males, which I thought at the time would inspire me to be the person I inevitably, I believe, became. But that really stumped me, and that pissed me off quite a bit. And I thought, well, where else am I going to get that from? And so, what does a young weedy kid at school do in the sixth form when they're 17 and a half? They decide to apply for their SIA license and become a bouncer. And so by 18, the sort of last part of sixth form, I was working 3 nights on the door. And that was like the starting point for me discovering who I truly wanted to be about, and then it kind of evolved from there.
Do you feel that evolution was you wanting to become the alpha male, or you were finding the pathway to be around them?
So it's only this year that I think the discovery was just wanting to be around that environment, not necessarily that dormant environment, but being around men who I thought would show me the way, because I'd lacked it for so long. Dad wasn't about much. Then when he started to come back into our lives, it was, every 2 or 3 weeks, maybe month. And then that sort of quieted off as we got a bit older. And Mum's boyfriend at the time, we were in the way. And so I thought it was about becoming an alpha male, because I was the elder brother. I thought I'd have to look after my brother. I thought I had to care for my mum, because she shouldn't have to do all of this. And only realising that now, I think I was just naturally doing it back then. And so I thought being a bouncer would be to become an alpha male. When that all went wrong, which I can talk about shortly, when that all went wrong, and then I inevitably went through my very dark period and then suddenly found the Corps, I suddenly realised the Corps gave me the environment I needed, as opposed to becoming the alpha male. If you want to become the alpha male in the Corps, you're going to get banged out pretty quickly and shown where to go. It's about understanding your place within that particular group of people. And that for me was what truly brought that sense of belonging out of me, as opposed to wanting to be the tough nut, the alpha male.
At a base sort of anthropological point of view, I think it's, if we really distilled it down, you were deprived of that community and that essential part of being a human for so long that you were on a mission to find it. And when you did, ultimately through the Marines and the Corps, that started to inform actually that next stage of your growth as a man. Because I'm right in thinking that you went through a real man-hating period, didn't you? Where it wasn't just a wanting to be with a different sort of man. You had a real anger towards men in general.
Yeah, and it doesn't exist anymore at all, and gladly. But I think it was during that period of being a bouncer, and I just seen the guys in my life bail in different ways. Dad legged it. People at school, teachers, just the guys I thought I needed as a shining light weren't there. And then my mum's boyfriend, just you look at him as if to say, please just help us, and you don't get anything in response. And it kind of does put you in that mindset, well, if you're not going to be like that, I'll try and be like that. And so you step out the door to try and be that tough guy, and then moving into the world of becoming a bouncer as a young lad, and you fucking learn very quickly that you aren't that guy. And especially where I was working in sort of Bedford, Northampton and Milton Keynes area, it was rough. People used to fill each other in all the time, and there was some super tough guys. But I actually stumbled across a few people on a particular team I was working on, which actually did kind of take me under their wing. They saw as a hothead. They saw I was trying to establish myself and prove myself, which means you got in a lot of shit as a bouncer because you're doing it wrong. And they kind of like, look, that's not how we do things. This is how we do things. And that for me was quite a life-changing part of working in that area, because I was like, these are the people who I need to be around, because they're educating me. That was the part I think I was lacking, was the education piece of how I become me as a man. And eventually sort of time would tell that would become the thing I'm looking for. And now I enjoy doing that. I enjoy being around guys and girls now listening to how can I take a piece of what you're saying and apply it to who I am as a person, and also now my children. You know, how do I do that, especially for my eldest lad, is doing those bits that I missed out on rather than constantly chasing around for it. And I think that's become such a shaping period for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think that the guidance must have been welcomed with open arms, even if you were a bit shit off to it to start with. But I think there was a rather defining moment in your time as a bouncer, wasn't there? If you're happy to talk through that process.
Yeah, there's two. Ironically, the second one I've not been talking about of much late, and I've decided to start talking about it. So how it unfolded was I started doing the door work as a full-time job. So I was doing sort of 6 nights a week, and I was embroiled in it. I was using steroids. I was doing all the classic go to martial arts and fighting clubs and trying to become a tougher person, naively. And you suddenly step up a little bit. You get that confidence. A lot's going on. These are the door days back in sort of 2007, 2008, where cameras were still a little bit less and things would still go wrong. And we had an incident where we had some gypsies come into the club, and we were quite a strong tour team at that time. We were 12, 13 people, good people as well. Some real tough nuts to crack. And I was actually leaving the club, or I was preparing to leave at 3 a.m. and I was taking my radio off in the sort of staff area, and then the club would close at 3:30. And as I was taking my radio off, there was like this horrific scream down the radio, and someone had called a code black. And so incidents in nightclubs work in code greens, everything's okay. Amber was like, it's about to go wrong. Red's it's kicked off, people are fighting, and black's like, we've lost full control. So I was with another guy, and we're like, oh shit, we better go to it. Went to that place in the nightclub where it happened, and when we arrived at the scene, there was a load of people basically on the floor scrapping it out. And I jumped in, started to pin the legs down of one of the people who was quite a giant, who I saw earlier in the night. And fast forward time, a couple of minutes, and one of the guys realised that he wasn't doing too well. And we rolled him over and began CPR on him straight away, and unfortunately passed away there and then on the spot. And a lot of us got caught up in the mix of what was at first murder down to manslaughter, and that what was eventually actually found as accidental death. And rightly, no one was to blame for that incident. It was just a horrific incident that went wrong, and someone had fallen, and that's unfortunately what happens. This event happened though, which some of us are allowed to continue working during the whole time because there'd not been a charge, so you're not seen as guilty. So we were actually allowed to work. We weren't allowed to work at that nightclub anymore. I went to work at another nightclub, and then it took about 6-7 months for it to finally all blow over, and the findings were what they were. And I was hoping that moment would have stopped me in my tracks to define me a little bit more and say, you need a career change. But I kept going, and I kept using more steroids. I then began using cocaine at the time. I was just becoming a really fucking horrible person to be around. And I was working at a nightclub, which again, great rapport with the team. It was actually a really good club, and it'd kick off all the time. There'd be loads to do, and you'd get a bigger and bigger ego out of that. There was one evening when, my last evening working there, I was near what was basically a really shit VIP booth, and I looked over and some guy just cleanly banged his missus out, like punched her square in the face. And from my past as a child, which I don't really talk too much detail about, I have a real thing for that. I just can't see that happen to a woman. So I just saw red, lost complete control of myself, ran over there and punched the guy straight in the face, broke his nose, and then started dragging him through the door and called the team up. And then it transpired that this person was extremely well known, was a very nasty character to be around, and had several nasty characters with him. And it got very heated in the corridor. Some of those nasty characters joined us, but no one really knew what had happened and who had done what. And so they were ushered out the club by the head doorman who knew them all. And then he turned to me and was like, "What the fuck did you do?" And I just punched him. He went, "You need to go home now." And the way he said it and the way he delivered it was like, fuck. And then I drove home. And then the next morning I got a phone call saying from the head doorman, who, great guy, always looked after us. He was like, "Mate, they're looking for you and it doesn't really look very good." I was like, "What do you mean they're looking for me? Who's looking for me?" He went, "They're outside your fucking house." And they were. And they said, basically they were watching me and no one was doing anything until it was sorted. And then I got a call from one of the not very nice people from central, where was it? East London. And that was their sort of connection in the drug world. They said, "Yeah, you need to be at this place on Monday morning." And it was the gym in Milton Keynes, one of the gyms in Milton Keynes, bit of a roid-ed gym. "Make sure you're there. I'll chat to you then." And that was it. I was like, fuck, shit. And I knew who this guy was. So fuck. And I was instantly just that small boy again. Felt like a coward. Felt small. Felt like I just wish I could just be 8 years old again and it'll be fine. And so I had to go into this gym. And I walked in there and he just shouted across the gym in front of everyone. He's a massive steroid user. He's like, "Get the fuck outside, I'll talk to you there." And he's got his mates with him. I was like, brilliant. That's one way to be seen. So I went and waited out in the car park, sort of tapping my feet while he finished his set. And then he came out and he was like, "You owe for what you've done. You'll pay up on Wednesday." I was like, fuck, like, I'm just a kid, really. Like, "What do you mean, pay up?" He went, "You'll pay up." And he gave me the figure of what I had to pay, which was in near to sort of $4,000 for breaking the guy's nose. And it was like, it was just old school hard men business. He's like, "You're being debted. Okay, I'm taxing you for your wrongdoings." I was like, fuck. And he was a known collector. And then so I had to go home, explain to my mum, like, I need to borrow some money. Go to some friends, like, I need to borrow some money. Just beg, borrow, steal off everyone I could so I could go back to TGI Fridays, ironically, where I was having to meet these guys on the Wednesday and hand over the cash. Literally, brown paper envelope, classic what you'd see in the films. Sort of like trying to get his attention at the door. He comes over, does that fucking shit counting they all do, just looks through the notes. He was like, "Cool." And then he put it away. He was like, "I hope you learnt from what you've done." And I was like a bit sheepish, like, "Yeah." He went, "You seem like a good lad. You don't need to be doing these types of things." And it just fucked me off. I was like, shook my hand, was really polite, and his mate was really polite about it. And then they went and carried on their business, and I sort of drove home and just felt so sorry for myself. Like, you hadn't been beaten up or anything like that. It was far more ego insulting than that. And for me, this just spiral just appeared after that. I got a final call from one of them who was pretty well known in the area and said, "Look, it wasn't nice, it went wrong, but I respect you fucking..." He said something bullshit. He said, "I respect you for it. If you want to work with us, let us know." And I was like, "I've just got no interest in this, sorry." And then pulled out. And that was it. I quit. I cut my SIA badge up. I didn't go and carry on working the door. So started deleting numbers. But the thing is, I didn't have a job. I didn't have the mental robustness that I think I have now to get a grip of myself. And my only way out was just feel like I'd lost that little world that I'd built around me for some time, that had shown me something that I could use. Just steroids went out the window and I was replacing that with cocaine and slightly harder drugs at the time. Didn't work. Spent my days feeling sorry for myself at home and got into a really depressed, suicidal area where I just didn't want to be here anymore.
I can imagine that must have been one of the most challenging periods, in the sense that it was that constant desire to fulfill a ego void, the alpha male void, to then be knocked back in such a, I don't want to use the word demoralising because there's no morality attached to the whole process really, but just the humiliation of you punched him in the face and then there was a sort of protocol to follow rather than a caveman chimp let's beat him up again, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that the mental side of that must have been very difficult, but it did seem to be a bit of a trigger for what happened next, which was ultimately you slowly starting to join the Corps, wasn't it, if I'm right in the timeline? So whilst you had those initial suicidal ideations and things, there was no further action in that sense. Am I right in thinking?
It got close, and I speak quite openly about this. So I had some coke in the house, and that blended with any form of other narcotic it just fucks you up. And I was selling stuff to use it, so I'd sold my car. It's an expensive drug, and I wasn't using it in the party style. I was using it just banging gear at home. And it was a Tuesday. Everyone was at work, and I was like, "The fuck am I doing with my fucking life right now?" And I got pretty charged up and was just in this bubble. And I went for a drive. My brother had left his car at home, a shitty banged up Corsa, and he was at work doing something. And I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to go and drive. And just, the drive's intention was to do something, but I didn't know what that was. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just drove for like 2 hours crying. And there was no like steer, there was no sudden moment when it like, this is it. It was just, I'm driving to do something here, and it never happened. I just drove in this massive fucking 2 hour circle off my tits basically, and got home. And it was just this weird void I was in. I was just in a complete void. And even in the book, I remember writing it thinking, I can't piece together that bit of time. It was just, and I think this is the thing about emotion, it could come so overwhelming. It's almost like you're grieving yourself. Like at a point in time, I won't be here anymore. And you go through the grief stage of everything you're about to lose. And it just becomes this blackout moment. And then I was at home, and I can't even remember if it was the same day, the day after, or that week. My mind's just erased it. But I remember going on to YouTube, like YouTube in its early days, fucking AOL dial-up, and then finally getting on. And it was, I'm not like a super spiritual person. I'm not a big kind of fate type of person. But this fucking video 100% found me. And it was the older version. It was the one where you get stuck in the tunnel. And it's an older advertising campaign. And I'm watching it in sort of end of 2007, 2008, I think. And I think the reason this video caught my attention was I felt like a coward compared to the kid who was clearly maybe my age or slightly younger in the video, who's like running across Woodbury Common on the Commando course, on the endurance course. Would you stop here? And it was like every time it paused, I was like, yeah, I'd stop there. And then it was like, would you stop here? Yeah, I'd stop there as well. Like, just completely demoralised is a great word. I actually was very demoralised at the time. And then it finally got to the end where he's on this speedboat, and it's like at night. You know the one we're talking about, and it's going 99% need not apply, whatever it was. And I just thought, what have I actually got anything to do? Like, I've considered fucking killing myself. I couldn't even do that. And there's this like image of like hiding in bushes as a sort of 7-8-year-old really sprung to mind and reminded me of, do you not remember that person you genuinely wanted to become? And you fucking rapped on it. You've given up. You went down the wrong way. Look at the state of yourself. And it was like this voice started to come in that was actually starting to get a grip. And he said it was genuinely like, what the fuck else have you got to lose? And I think part of me just lacked the courage to like kiss my missus and my mum goodbye. I've been with my missus for a while, and I love my mum, and I felt like I had to always be around her to continue being that alpha male for the house, if that's what I was trying to be. And then I went downstairs, and she was there. I was like, Mum, I think I'm going to join the military. And what the Marines didn't do was go, yeah, man, you're going to join the Marines and walk downstairs, but I'm going to be a commando. It actually was, I'm going to join the military. I think I'm going to go and do something really dog shit in the military and like count potatoes or something like that. But I'm going to start to get a grip of my life. And she was like, awesome. Like, she cried with pride because she knew I was the last person to realise how much of a fuck up I'd become, and everyone else had seen me fall apart around me. And then I went into Milton Keynes career office a few days later, basically said, just like bag of shit, big grey baggy eyes. And I was like, I want to join the army, I think. And this rifleman was like, yeah, join the rifles, it's the best. I was like, oh, okay. And kind of went through a bit of a process. And then just by chance, one of my best friends from school was in Royal Marines training. And I spoke to him about it. And he was like, mate, do not join the rifles. Do not join the rifles. Go to Loopin careers office. You won't regret it. And so I did. And that's where it all changed.
It's interesting to me that you said you thought about killing yourself, but you couldn't even do that. Because the ego attachment to that being a failure, when in reality still being alive is obviously a huge success.
Yeah.
That for me, when I was suffering that way and actually had come around from a suicide attempt, that you couldn't even do this, you useless prick, was the turning point for me to actually start to understand and actually start to have that similar voice of how to get a grip. It had just been for so long I was spinning so much out of control. It was almost the false dichotomy of, somewhere in the back of my head, the ridiculousness of calling myself a failure for not having been able to end my own life allowed me to start to think, right, something needs to change here. So it's just interesting to hear that you, even in that small phraseology, had a similar sort of masculine overtone to the way in which you interacted with that, because it's such a stupid thing to think, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm bad at not being able to kill myself. It's just it's just a ridiculous way to think, and that for me was a huge turning point. It sounds like it was for you as well. And the Marines then, 32 weeks, isn't it, training course? So what was the turnaround time from you going to the Luton recruitment office to being engrossed and involved in the Corps?
So it's about a year. It took quite a while, and probably just under a year. And so, I had to obviously clean my act up quite a bit. There's no overnight heroics where it was like, it's suddenly fucking clean. And like Rocky running up steps. I had to work quite hard physically on myself. I'd just been abusing steroids for quite some time. I'd not come off the cycles properly. And then I'd replace that with other drugs, basically. And that had a complete different impact on my body. So running was just horrendous. Getting strength back was difficult. But the thing is, what I discovered, I was finally on a path towards what I thought was success, and that just became this fuel. And I remember when I first applied, it was quite a cold time, and I running out the door and feeling that air in your lungs, and just the being introduced to actual endorphins, not fucking chest on a Monday with a load of steads in you just to get massive. Like, it was a different type of endorphins I'd not experienced. Real, like, cold air. I started cooking myself, like, big carby dinners because I thought that's what it's all about. Just clean my life up. And it took time. I didn't stop smoking weed for quite a while. I ditched coke rapidly, like, flushed it. But I couldn't get weed out of my life for a while. And then I slowly started to get off that. And then when that stopped, I was like, fuck, I'm actually starting to feel good, mentally and physically. And then, go through all the tests. I remember shitting myself about medical because I was like, oh my God, this is going to be full of stuff. So I shaved my hair purely because I thought they're going to find, they'll cut my follicles away and they're going to find weed in my follicles, and it's in there for years. So that went, and, medical's the medical, isn't it? And got through that, no problems. And then PRMC came along. And the irony about this all is I was so pumped for my PRMC, the potential Royal Marines course. I was like, I can't wait to be down at Lympstone. This thing I've seen, like, I've been watching Commando on the Front Line, Terry John and all them lot for too long. And but I've never physically seen it. And I was just so excited to get behind the gates and just be there. And then I fucking ate a pizza the night before and got horrific food poisoning. And I was like, why? Why does this have to happen? Why does this have to happen at this moment? And I was shitting and vomiting. And I was like, fuck it, I'm still going to go. Like, and I know any guy, any bootneck with a fucking brain cell these days would be like, why don't you just push it to the next course? But you don't do that at the time. It's like, oh, I gotta go. I'm like all grey and hanging out on the train. And I get there. And Jen, what's the 3 mile and a half? You know, the mile and a half best effort. Like, I came in at like 10:29 or something like that, dying. Like a second to spare, and the corporal's like, "Hey, the fuck are you? Why the fuck are you bothering being here, mate?" And like the part of me, the civvy in me, just wanted to put his hand up and be like, "I've got food poisoning. Like, this is a hoofing effort what you're seeing right now." And I didn't, obviously, knowing that he'd just fucking snap at me. So I was like, "Sorry, corporal." And then there's a determination test and all these things, but I fucking passed it. Like, I remember how my interview, the guy was just like, "I don't know how you've got through this." He didn't know I was ill, but he's like, "Your fizz is shit, and I suggest you go away and work on your fizz." I was like, "Yeah," but in my mind, that was it. I was like, "I've passed. I know I've fucking passed this hanging out, but I don't care what you think about me. I've passed." And arriving at Commando Training Centre 2 months later was the moment I stepped off that train. Yeah, I was scared, and I think everyone's worried, but for the first time in my life, it felt like a success. And I know most of the 18, 19, 20-year-olds around me on the train station or in Foundation were like, "Oh, fuck, what have I jumped into?" And everyone's got their different thoughts going. For at least the first half an hour, I was like, I genuinely feel like a success. Like, I'm so proud that I've even got here. I've beaten this depressive part of my life. I've got some experiences and some scars to show, and I've beaten myself. Literally, I've beaten that ego-driven, drug-fueled dick that I hated being around anyway, to be at a centre of excellence. And then about half an hour later, after my first set of press-ups and getting fucking goosed for not being quick enough, I was like, "Oh, this is fucking shit," but at least I'm here, and I just enjoyed it. I loved it.
No, it's big turning point, isn't it? Big turning point. And then things develop quite rapidly again as you're on your first operational tour. Not too long afterwards, are you?
Yeah. I got out there quite quick, I'd say. 2009, passed out in 2010, went to 4-2, and then, I was on Herrick 14 in 2011. And it is just a crazy ride, isn't it? We knew it was going to be pretty shit. And I'm one of those bootnecks which really tries to be my tour's not was worse than your tour type of guy. I'm not driven by that. I think the experience you suffer at the time is so personal to yourself and those that it's happening with, and it doesn't compare to statistics or what units like this and who's got the most dits and who had the most amount of contacts. To me, it wasn't about that. I really fucking enjoyed Afghan, but I hated it at the same time. It was tough, and we lost guys, and we were constantly dealing with that threat of IEDs every day, and you just don't know if it's going to be your last day or you're going to see a leg come flying past your head. And I think that was for me like really difficult to deal with in that constant footstep pressure and where we go in next. But we had a great time. We had a great bunch of guys. We knew we were doing a good job. There was a lot of bad rep that came out of that tour as well, and it's all in the news. You don't have to look far to see what went wrong. But we weren't murderous. We were doing a great job and just getting on with it. And it's interesting as well because at the time the London riots were happening, and when the London riots happened, James Wright was killed in J Company about 2 days before. And when you tune in to see all about it and like see if his name's in the press, and you look at just the country in fucking shambles, you quickly felt quite forgotten, and like everything felt forgotten. So, and there was this like kind of uproar amongst ourselves, and like what's even the fucking point of going out on patrol? Because we had an evening patrol coming up that night. What's the point? Like James Wright was killed the other day. We've lost a few lads up to that point. Dino's been killed recently. We've lost fucking too many guys to amputations. Like, why are we bothering doing this? No one gives a shit. And then you have to like detach yourself away from. I remember one of the corporals saying, "Just fucking put it to one side, lads. Whatever's going on at home's going on at home. You have to concentrate on your job here in the moment." And there's a real wake up call. It reminds you of like what being a bootneck's all about, and going out on patrol and just being in the local village for half an hour to an hour is like hopefully repelling the Taliban. Like kids can run free for at least half an hour. You can give them some chocolate, and you actually realise you do have a heart. In amongst the bullshit that's happening back at home, I think that was quite a turning point for a lot of us, and I'm glad that happened on our tour. I'm glad we got to be able to experience that, to be able to realise, well, it doesn't matter what the big picture's doing. It's how you are, that cog in that moment, which has become a big thing that I've used in building my own businesses and building my own teams and working with other teams, is getting people to really realise what they are as that individual cog, as opposed to like, oh my god, what's happening in the bigger world. But yeah, like it ended up quite gnarly. We went on an operation, 7-day operation into where was it? Nadi Ali North and South Divider, that sort of borderline in the middle where the Taliban just had fucking free reign. They want to be in there. Grenade comes over the wall, takes out the MFC, takes out 4 other guys, and we have to fly them out. And then the Taliban start their fantastic attacks. They're getting right up close to the base, to the compound, and it was getting fucking hairy. That was the day Vicey won his MC for calling in mortar fire when they were coming up to the compound, but we didn't have an MSC, so he was calling it in untrained, and you sat there going, shit, I hope he's got the right coordinates here as well, because things are getting really close. And I think was the first and last time in theatre where I was like, wow, you suddenly realise how normal this can feel, and that your adrenaline's not even pumping as much as it used to, and the firefights are happening and it's not your turn, so you're just looking up at the roof, like not even bothered, just waiting to go up to do your thing. And we were meant to be there for 7 days, and then the second day we went out on an early morning patrol and went through like a probably 7-foot cornfield, which feels like the jungle at the time, peered out onto a road, and it was just a small track that led up to a compound we were going to go and visit. And I was number 2, Jordan was in front, rest of the team behind. We came out onto the track, and I looked at the track, and there was a farmer came across on his tractor, and he just looked at us and then just like fucked off as quick as you can make a tractor go. And it was like this first warning sign that things don't feel good here. There was no one about, no kids, no women, not even any guys in the street, just this one tractor. And then we came up to the junction, and just out of this compound walked 2 guys literally next to us. And we were like, stop, in our broken, I don't even know what it was at the time, but dresh. And they just looked at us. They were dressed head to toe in black. They had the full black face masks on, all the wrap. And they had trainers on, and that was like a identifying time at the park. It was like, if they're wearing trainers, they're more than likely Taliban. And look down at their feet, and then I remember like it was just almost comical. Like look down at their feet, and then look back up at their eyes, and their eyes bulged, and we were like, "Fuck!" And they're just here, like they're in with grabbing range, and then they just legged it down this track, and like you couldn't do anything. No one was. You weren't going to shoot them in the back. They didn't have any weapons. You're not going to be as quick as them in all your body armor, and you just like. I think looking back, I had a lot of guilt around this moment because it goes wrong. And I remember thinking, we could have shot him. We could have fucking heroically put him in a headlock and won all the medals in the world. But in the moment, it just doesn't work like that. Hindsight's amazing. It was just like, fuck, the Taliban. And they knew it straight away, and they just legged it as quick as they could down this track, as we're sort of like kind of trying to run after him a little bit. And then they dart off right into the field, and you could hear him rustling through the field. It was just the snapping of all the corn and the stalks. And then I turned around, and because the running had stopped, you could hear him like through the cornfield, and then it just stopped, and it was just to our right. And then I looked at Vicey, our corporal, and he just went, fucking run, up to the compound which we were heading towards. And he knew they were either going to ambush us or something. And I took like 2 steps, and the wall to our right just fucking exploded, and it was a hell of a bang. And instantly all the dust and shit in your mouth, and you can't see anything. You've got that instant tinnitus. And I fell back, basically. I took something through the legs, and I fell back onto my legs, and I sat down. And as the sort of dust was clearing around me, of what I could just about work out, I noticed my right leg was forward, normally, and then all I could see was like my thigh and then my knee on my left leg, and there was a lot of pain. I was like, oh fuck. I was fucking like instantly like, fuck, it's me. I've stood on an IED, and I thought I'd had my leg blown off in the moment. Completely like, just, I was slightly concussed because something hit me in the back of the head. I was like, fucking hell. Oh my god, I'm never be able to walk again, feeling really emotionally sorry for myself in the moment. And then like somehow realised I was sat on my foot and that I just sat down in basically a shit splits. I was like, oh god, thank God for that. And then my leg it was covered in claret from, I had taken some shrapnel, which was the pain. I was like, oh, and then I started calling out. I was just in my own bubble. I was like, don't worry lads, I'm fine. To then the dust cleared and I looked back down the track and I was like, fuck. Everyone was just on the floor, dying. And the nearest one to me was Vicey, so I crawled to him and started to give him first aid to his neck where he was having a severe bleed, and looking past him onto the other lads, just everyone was fucked. And then the section came, the rest of the section came up, so 7 of us got hit. And it was basically what turned out to be a directional fragmentation one, which was hidden in the wall. So what we believe happened was the 2 people we bumped into ran into the field, picked up the battery, put it into the detonation cord, and then the ID went off in front of our faces. I was lucky as fuck because I'd stepped forward quite a bit when Vicey said run, but Vicey and the team behind took the full blast to the face. And so we, in amongst the chaos of like feeling injured and sorry for myself, was trying to patch up some of the guys. And then fast forward 24 hours, we went through triage at Bastion, operated on at Bastion, and then back in the UK. And there's something quite sobering about 1 minute your fingers are deep into your friend's or your leader's neck trying to save his life with other people, and then you've got a bed to yourself in crisp white sheets in sunny Blighty, and it becomes quite a life-changing moment, to say the least.
It all happens in a heartbeat, and there you are. That's back overseas. It's must have been terrifying. What was the outcome there? How many of the lads are still with us, and how many of them didn't make it?
Just through quick thinking and unfortunately a lot of experience up until that point in treating people, everyone was saved. A few limbs are missing. Vicey died twice on the helo, and they managed to bring him round. Richie Paincott, who came and saw, I was fucking making an absolute calamity. If it was left to me, I joke about it, Vicey, he wouldn't be here, because I was like holding all sorts of arteries, like fucking trying to put things back together like crocodile clips at school. And then Richie came over and sort of smacked my hands out of the way and was like, let me deal with him. Started fucking saving his life. And I think without that moment and that intervention, then we wouldn't have had him. But guys made it. Unfortunately, 4 of them discharged, missing bits, and a few neuro problems because one of the guys took a large piece of shrapnel through the head, another through the throat. Like, how anyone survived it's beyond belief. But that's just classic warfare. Like, only afterwards you're like, what the fuck? How the fuck did everyone survive that? And everyone did, and it's taken a lot for probably some of them to get to where they are now, and it's been a difficult journey, but they've got their lives, and I think that's the biggest thing.
Fantastic. And what happens next for you?
Yeah, so I found myself in a bit of a place where I was thinking a little bit how I was before the Corps, and I felt really guilty. Like, one of the biggest things I really struggled with was we could have stopped them. We could have stopped that IED going off. It went off behind me, which makes me feel like I'd walked past it. I had an IED go off a few weeks before, right behind me, which took out one of our bosses, blew his leg off. And you even look at that, like, fuck, I went over that. And none of that, oh my God, that could have been me. It's like, fuck, I could have spotted that, or could I told him to go on a different way? And so that kind of started dripping into my life a little bit. And I actually forced myself through rehab really quickly. So I had a few cuts and bumps, nothing horrendous. I got a bit of rehab time. And then I actually found myself cracking a CFT and a BFT back at 4-2, so I could join the lads when they came back off 2 weeks leave, I think it was, because it was right at the end of the tour. So I got myself fit, joined the company, and just something didn't feel right. I started boozing and drinking quite a bit. I started getting in a lot of trouble, and then it all got really, really bad, with the sense of I basically had 2 court-martial cases for different events which took place for my wrongdoings and what turned out to be right doings on one occasion, defending one of the guys. But the thing that happened was I had a kid on the way, and I was like, are you really going to start living your life like this again, drinking and getting in trouble and feeling sorry for yourself? And I had an amazing CO at the time, OC, who's in charge of Lima Company, took over from Alec, who was the OC for Herrick, and then Ollie came in, and he spotted that I wasn't a G1 nightmare, or sorry, for listeners who don't know what G1 is, basically someone who just goes around causing problems in the military. He knew I wasn't a G1 nightmare, and what he realised was I was having some major snags, and I was in trouble, but he didn't pin me against the wall. He was like, I need to help you. And like, for a major, he could have easily just fucked you off and is someone else's admin. And he helped me go and get treatment and seek treatment. And that was it, really. I sort of was in at DCMH down in, where was it, Drake, wherever it was, getting treated. And I was also going to Headley Court for more sort of specialist trauma treatment, mental trauma treatment, and just trying to rebuild myself a little bit. And I hadn't processed anything properly, and that's what that sort of period of time helped me do. And then I had a court-martial, basically the trial of someone pulled a knife out when we were ashore, out on the piss with a couple of lads, and I saw it, so I just I made a classic intervention that I seemed to be doing up to those years. But I was the one who got in trouble for it, and so I had to go all the way to court-martial to prove that this thing happened. And turns out the guy had it out on CCTV and put it in a statement that he had it with him. So the court were just like, this is bullshit. It cost a lot of money to get to that point for them to realise. But the biggest thing out of all of that was I had a kid, and I'd had to pack my bag that day to go to Colchester if I was found guilty, to then likely facing straight into civvy pen after that, because of the degree of the assault, which turned out wasn't. And the moment I got not guilty, I was like, fucking hell, that is like the closest shave I can ever have now. And went home, and Zach, I think, must have been 5 weeks old, and I just hugged him. And I made this like promise to myself that whatever happens in life, just keep the focus and begin to be the guy you need to be for this boy now. And ever since then, I've not been in a single fight. I can't be arsed with altercations, and I've just changed my outlook on how we are as humans. And what I found the best thing was realizing as a guy, it's okay to talk about who you are and how you are, and that's not about whose dits it is. I would have never shared these stories with you probably a year or two ago, as I was still coming around to the thought of, well, it just sounds like you're trying to fucking blow your own trumpet and say how hoofing you are. It's not. They're a culmination of events that have taken place in my life that have shaped me to who I am today, that has made me realise that as a guy, it's totally acceptable to show your emotions. It's okay to feel down. It's okay to say how you are. And it's okay to be you. Like, how fucking mental is that? Like, living in the 21st century, and you have to realise it's okay to be you. And that is just part of the journey to this point that now enables me to do what I do. And the biggest thing in that is being a good father. Which I think my family never had up to that point. And so this is my way of probably finding my true destiny.
Which is an amazing thing. And it sounds like your son was the real calibration point for all the lessons that you'd learned from your life up until that point. Your military experience, your childhood experience, the ups and downs along the way. And then reflecting on, once you're in that better headspace, what were the key lessons that you took from your operational experience, what you've done to date, the mistakes that you've made that you now carry with you into a very, very different career?
Yeah, I think the operational stuff is that I didn't really realise. I know I'd matured and I know I'd sort of worked it out, but I didn't know what I'd worked out. I just found this new path, which I'll talk about in a second. Where it came really clear for me was when we pulled out of Afghan recently this year, and it was obviously such a dramatic pullout, and we all know what happened in the news. And seeing and hearing from, and just speaking to them, like a lot of veterans being so angry about it and really quite volatile over it, which is fine. That's their perception, and I don't disagree with that. My reflection is, personally, well, without those experiences, no matter how you pull out, you got to pull out. Like, that bit's, you can argue all day long over tactics of how that was done. Do we agree? Don't we agree? I don't really want to go into that. Like, that's not my place to comment. My bit is to realise, how do I feel now it's happened and we're completely out of there? And how can I help other veterans maybe see how I'm seeing it? Without that war, we would have never had the medical experience. You got guys saving people's lives in RTAs, guys and girls, from stuff they've learnt. You've got nurses who are in casualty wards in the UK now, who have been in Bastion for an experience trip, who are now just so much better at their job. Like, our kit, our tactics came on, all this type of stuff, which is great. So the skill sets really, really flourished over that time and gave us what we have now to move into the next generation of the military. But as individuals, fucking hell, yeah, we lost a lot of people, and it's horrible. Like, I remember our friends every day which we've lost, and even the ones we continue to lose, unfortunately. But we all signed the dotted line. That's the biggest thing, and that's a personal feeling towards it. Is, how can I feel angry at a situation or emotional towards a situation where I signed the dotted line to be there? I put my signature on the mark, I wrote the will, and I agreed that I'd go to a place of danger where inevitably someone was going to get hurt. And we never forget those people. We will never forget them. Some of them are etched in our skin. And they will always be there, but we can remember them for the good, as opposed to the anger of how we lost them, and that now the war's past, we forget them. It doesn't happen like that. I think we remember them more, as opposed to when it's still going on. And I think this, I already knew this, but I wasn't very clear with this over my last few years of transitioning away from the military. And I think that for me it's a personal part of my journey to realise how far I've come, how mature I am about situations now, to now think, how does it actually benefit us, as opposed to feel down and sorry about it. Like, and the real fulfilling thing around this was, I did a talk recently for Sky, and they said, would you mind speaking to our veterans community? And I was like, absolutely, I'd love to speak to her. I did the same for Salesforce as well. And I used this it was around that withdrawal time, and I was like, I used it as a moment to share with as many veterans as possible, to say, you should never look at the news and see what's going on in the world to feel angry or emotional or make assumptions around the political situation. You need to remember who you are as individuals and what you've achieved because of those experiences, and how you are now and what you can use moving forward. And that, mate, for me, was one of the most fulfilling things I've been able to ever express, and just say it how it is. And I don't think a few years ago I'd have been like that, to be honest. So I think operational experience is amazing. It gives you experiences that you would never find in the civilian world. Like, someone stacked a car the other day near my house and rolled it, and then people in there screaming and bleeding. And like, the guy comes, the bootneck comes in, he's like, right, fuck it, to the rescue. And you go in there and you got control of the situation, and you actually can Kazivac them properly, and everyone's losing their shit around you, and you're like, calm the fuck down. You call 999. And like, there's no heroic bullshit there. Like, you're just there doing a job when it goes wrong because of the experiences you have. And even my business partner was like, how the fuck does that stuff always happen to you all the time? Because it just seems to, like, the odd thing keeps happening at the moment. I was like, I'd rather it be me than someone else who just loses their shit. And that's like the benefit of being able to see through some stuff. Sometimes it's super dramatic like that. Other times it's having a conversation like this with another veteran to just be like, hey, no matter what's happened in the past, we've got to realise some of those things now really hold a future for us for what we can do with them, like your resilience, your use of values, your ethos, all these things. And that for me has been like the big changer, definitely.
Yep. No, I can imagine, and it's become a fundamental component of the next stages of your career, hasn't it? So, coaching was the focus from, am I right in saying, about 2017 until pandemic?
Yeah.
And then there's a new section, but we'll get onto that post coaching stages.
Yeah. Coaching stuff was wicked. So, at the time in the Corps, I had that unbelievable experience to work with England football. So Gareth Southgate brought the team down to Lympstone, and I was one of the small team that spent the time with them and went on that little journey with them before they went out to the World Cup. And I'd never sort of, apart from the Corps, really been around super high performing athletes like that. And it was like my first opening to them, realising how normal they are and how down to earth they are. I was working with the recruits at the time, and I was really loving the recruit journey. I was loving taking kind of guys like me from Civvy Street, taking them on the Royal Marines 32-week course and passing them out. I'd loved that. That was genuinely one of the most fulfilling things in my career, is being stood on that parade square with the recruits you've created. And so I really got into this coaching thing, did a few of the courses at Lympstone, and started to get a couple of the qualifications, and then had this amazing experience of England. And I was like, fuck, this is really cool. Like, there's some stuff within this bootneck shit where they say civvies pay thousands. They do indeed. And how can I use some of this, and how can I use some of what we're doing to do something? I don't know. That's what it was. And ironically, at the time, I just before England visited, went in, did my whole selection stuff. I'm going SF. This is my route. Been on the hills, fucked my Achilles up, came back off the hills. I was like, I'll go back on. And just completely fucked up the hearing test. And the whole 3-second rule thing, which was press it, leave it, press it, leave it, had seemed to have changed. And I got caught out. And then I went from like, here's your SF paperwork, to, you're probably going to have to look at MBOS. So you've got to go see the doctor this afternoon. Instantly downgraded. But I was in such a good headspace where I was like, fuck, that's so shit. I love the Corps. It's made me who I am. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. I wonder if there's something else I can do if this is going to be the course of action. And I knew my hearing was bad. Fucking hell, I took a IED to the right temple, basically. And it's always been horrendous. And I think I lived through the Corps thinking there'll be a moment I get caught out. And when that moment appears, it appears. And it appeared, and working with England was like this big eye-opener to think, all right, if I'm going to be a civilian, can I do this? And that's where it all began. And you know, I kept in contact with some of those guys. They didn't win the World Cup, but their success in the World Cup really actually helped me in some way. People paid attention. You just got known as, oh, you're that Marine who worked with the England football team. It was really cool, and it just gets you through a few more doors. And then Anthony, who's my business partner now, Tomo, we started talking, and we were like, hey, should we go fucking change the world? I was like, yeah, why not? And then we went on this coaching venture, and we had an amazing time. Like 2 guys, 2 ex-bootnecks. We were making really good money. We were working with some incredible businesses. We were running an Engage program for 3,500 employees, just Tomo and I, training literally every single one in small workshops for one of the big banks. We ended up working with Facebook. We really leveraged the veterans community to see where we can get to and talk to people. I wrote the book for Penguin, and we're just having a great time. We're just having a great time. And I thought, fucking hell, this is easy shit. This is only going to get better as well. And then, yeah, the news started piping up once again about things going wrong in the world. And March last year, it all went tits up, didn't it? And we were like, what are we going to do now?
Yeah. Everybody in their own way had that moment. And I think there's been several iterations and evolutions between now and then. And we seem to be back in the moment again at the moment, which is suboptimal, if we're going to put a neutral spin on things. But
Yeah.
you and Tomo didn't chuck in the can and fall apart, did you? You pivoted and have come up with a new venture, which is aiming to change the world, but in a slightly different and, dare I say, more formalised way.
Yeah, definitely. And like, let's be honest, like two bootnecks a couple of years ago saying they're going to change the world was probably our way of saying, let's team up and then let's just see what happens, and then some way along the way we'll do something groundbreaking. And that doesn't come from arrogance or ego. That comes from a belief that we enjoyed the whole personal development journey. You know, one of the big turning factors for me in my life when it was going wrong in the Corps was an awesome dude I was on a team with, or in a troop with, gave me the Chimp Paradox, and I read it and I was like, fuck, this book was written just for me. Like, this is solely me. And then jumped on the personal development bandwagon and was listening to all the cheesy Tony Robbins talks and everything else, but it was fulfilling. Like, I loved it. I genuinely was like, I'm going to do
It's empowering as well, isn't it? Because it makes you feel like there's a lot more that you can change that didn't seem to be there before.
No, and you begin to learn new things about yourself. Like, Leaders Eat Last. I've still got it. I treasure this, right? So this is Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. And I remember reading the opening chapter, like it's all highlighted. And I keep this at the desk as a bit of pride. And I was like, fuck, this guy's talking about Afghan. Like, he went to Afghan for like 3 days and someone fired a mortar at the massive camp. And he's written pretty much a book about it and then gone on to working with the teams. And I was like, I've got some experiences I could share. And not from like a, look how hoofing I am, but like, how can I actually take some of these experiences and apply it to something in a book? And I just started journaling. I just started writing something, and it took a long time for it to actually come to fruition. But I got really inspired by Simon and his work. And then fast forward a few years, and his editing team became my editing team with Penguin. And then I actually got to work with Simon during the pandemic last year on a course that I'd put together on his platform. I was like, that's not through ego or lack of humility. That's just like, fuck, this world is so big and you can go and do such cool, crazy stuff in it. And it was at that time I was working on his platform last year that I sort of rang Tomo. I had like this, I tried ringing him. He didn't pick up. It was like 2:00 in the morning. I just sort of sat upright in bed. I'd been thinking a lot because the moment the pandemic kicked in, no one wanted coaching, no one wanted workshops. It couldn't happen for a start. And then businesses were like, fuck your coaching. We're trying to shut the doors here and make sure that we don't go under. And so we had a little bit of cash in the bank when we thought if this lasts for about 3 or 4 months, we could probably get through it. Lucky we didn't stick to that plan. And I was doing a bit of work for Simon and a few other things. And then this just epiphany happened at like 2:00 in the morning. I woke up and started writing notes, put the light on. My missus was like, can you go downstairs and do that? I was like, yeah, sure. And I was just thinking, like, everything we'd seen in the Corps and everything up to this point in the coaching world was companies have got a really shit way of engaging their people and keeping them engaged. And I just thought we could do something here. And just made some notes and thought about it, spoke to him the next day. And then we're like, yeah, let's just do this. He wanted to go into tech quite early on. I was like, I don't want to go into tech. I don't know anything about tech. I don't know what we're going to do in tech. There's a lot of money you need for tech. Let's just enjoy this coaching wave. It's awesome. But this suddenly felt right. And I was like, there is something here in connecting people better within organizations. That was my theory at the time. And that was it. Like, we just steamrolled into it. I was rung him the next day. Jack, who was doing a little bit of work for us as well at the time, who's still with us now. I was like, guys, I've had this idea. We started playing around with the ideas. We're all in hybrid. We're all working from home. And then I went out to my contact book and just like, anyone got any cash for us to do this? And then we were pledged some money, 400 grand to be honest. And we're like, fuck, yes, we're in. Okay, cool, right. The guy who's pledging the money, still very close to us, just realises his business doesn't always go to plan. He's like, hire the team, the money will be in a month. And we're like, okay. So we hired the team. We're just coming out of that first lockdown, so we open up a really shit small office in Weston in an attic on an industrial estate next to a dump. so it smelled like shit. We didn't even have internet, so this is how bad we were and cowboy we were.
Makes for a good story.
It does, doesn't it? We didn't have any internet in this attic, and we're a tech company. And I remember our first developer who joined us, who's now our CTO, came in and he was like, where's the Wi-Fi router? And we're like, we ain't got any Wi-Fi routers, just fucking do your phone, like log up to your hotspot. And he was like, for real? Like, yeah, why not? He was like, I can't code with that. So he ended up working from home for a while. And then it's probably now we're getting towards September and we're not seeing this money come in. And then we get the dreaded phone call saying, guys, that cash ain't coming in. And we were like, what do you mean that cash isn't coming in? He was like, I can't get hold of it. I'm so sorry. You have to look for a new investor. Like, fuck. And only because I continued doing some coaching during that time, that we had enough money that would get now our small team that's gone from Ben and Tomo, which costs a couple of grand a month to look after, to like a wage bill of about 30 grand a month. And it was like, oh dear, okay, nice hiring you guys. Now we're going to have to start firing you guys within 2 months. We got till Christmas. And we went through the rigmarole. Like, it's an economical downturn. Shit's gone wrong. Pandemic's there. No one's investing in anything. And we were like, we went through meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting of no. We didn't even have a product. Like, we had these developers and team like trying to create a product. We didn't even have a product to show people. They're like, yeah, go on then, show us your technology. Well, we can't. It's a PowerPoint of our vision. Yeah, does that sound good? You're willing to invest into that? And fast forward, we managed to get another investor to agree late on into the year, and we closed the deal, and the money was in the bank 9 days before the last payroll, which would have had no one getting paid. And we made it.
Good thing you're desensitized to adrenaline at this point, I'd say.
Oh, mate, honestly, that's what I mean. Like, Friday, when that person rolls a vehicle, it wasn't like, oh my God. It was just like, oh, Jen. And
here we go again, yeah.
Yeah, but it is. That's why before we started recording this, I was sharing with you that as much as I take nothing away from no wrongdoings or bad tone towards Afghan and people's efforts in Afghan and warfighting, this is a whole new ball game, and you will experience it yourself in setting up your own businesses. Once you're in, and you almost have no choice. And I've got 2 kids, I've a wife, a mortgage. Tomo's got a family. I've got 11 people on my team. They all need paying, and you don't want to just let them go just because you have to let them go, and you need to keep it going for some time. I now have investors, I have customers. Like, you just don't switch off. And honestly, the adrenaline thing. So this is when I realised, this is the other week actually, another fucking car problem. I was driving down the motorway on the way back from Bristol, because that's where our new offices are, and it was 7:30 in the right hand lane, 80 miles an hour maybe, 70 miles an hour tops, 80 miles an hour maybe, and I looked down just for a second to look back up, and there was a set of headlights in the right hand lane driving back at me, and I was just sort of like fucking flicked out the way to watch it go by, and it's some nutter just in that right-hand lane, just speeding down the motorway, just either trying to take people out or just fucking had a shocker. And I was like, fuck. So I rang the police. Hey, there's a guy driving down the other side of the road at the moment, almost wiping cars out. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, we're starting to get alerts to that now. Cheers for letting us know. Yeah, no worries. Put the phone down. And I drove for about 10 minutes before I realised this just has not affected you whatsoever. And so I rang my business partner. I was like, mate, fucking weirdest things happened. Spun him the dip like it was normal. So bloke drove the other way. He was like, whoa. I was like, that's not the bit I'm concerned about. The bit I'm concerned about is how it's had no impact. Like, no heart rate, no adrenaline rush, nothing. Just driving. And so we grabbed a coffee a day or two later, and I sat down. I was like, you suddenly realise running this business and the stress of running it has just kept that cortisol and adrenaline level so high, which we all know can be dangerous if you don't look after it properly. And I have had memory function problems, which you forget things and all these things that are attributed to high adrenaline states. That then an event happens and it's like blip, and then just carry on like normal. And it's such a wake up call to be like, wow, I'm taking 2 weeks off at Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, well, glad to hear it. Sounds like whoever's driving that car could do with a couple of weeks off as well. But
Yeah.
potentially a couple of weeks, couple of years in a different sort of institution. But never mind, we'll never know, I'm sure. But no, thank you for a really, really broad overview of everything that's made you and Loopin what it is today and who you are today. So where can people find you if they'd like more information about you, yourself, the Commando mindset, or Loopin and the vision that is now more than just a PowerPoint, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a fully fledged product. My Instagram's Ben_Williams_CM. If you want to follow me there. My book, Commando Mindset by Penguin, is out and available. Perfect Christmas gift or post-Christmas gift if this is going out afterwards. And if you have any interest in what Loopin is, visit www.letsloopin.com and you'll find out more there.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Ben, and have a good Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.